everybody and welcome back to the channel. In today's video we're going to be taking a look at the Transformers Kingdom War for Cybertron Trilogy Core Class Hot Rod, and what a surprise. Honestly, I don't think anyone was expecting this guy to show up for the foreseeable future, let alone in the final wave of Kingdom figures, but alas, here he is, and honestly I think it makes perfect sense, especially with the holiday season just around the corner. The only other versions that we've seen of this guy were the Voyager Studio Series and of course even the Commander Class Rodimus Prime, both of which are rather on the more expensive side of the spectrum, so to get this more affordable figure I think is a really nice move. And of course the core class figures so far have been really well done, and Hot Rod is a popular character, so it would stand to reason that he would be the next in the line of Autobots. Now we'll waste no time at all and of course take a quick look here at the packaging. You can see in regards to artwork, Hot Rod there looks absolutely fantastic. You can see wielding what appears to be maybe the sword of Primus that's been decked out with this super awesome almost Energon infused effect, which I imagine we'll see more of in Transformers Legacy. You can see we've got a really great window view here of the actual figure. Now granted, when this was first unveiled I didn't think it looked as good as some of the other figures, but I'll reserve my judgment for when of course I do in fact actually crack him open. And then as we just spin our attention here to the back, of course we've got some nice product shots here of Hot Rod in robot as well as vehicle mode. So without further ado, let's crack this guy open and see how one of the final Kingdom figures does in fact actually stack up. And so here we have the Kingdom Core Class Hot Rod cracked open and out of the packaging, and suffice to say sadly he really doesn't live up to the standards set by some of the previous releases. I really do feel that he's an almost back to basics in terms of what this scale used to be able to accomplish, and really doesn't wow me like Soundwave and Starscream did, but he's still not too bad once more, especially for that $10 price point. Now we'll take a closer look here at the details. You can see surprisingly he actually has a fair amount of paint here for bot mode, especially where that torso is concerned. I think the sculpt work for the face looks pretty nice. You can see there's some nice detailing for the actual head crest, and of course the face has been picked out with a rather nice glossy grey, and of course the eyes there done in blue. You can see here for the torso region, surprisingly the sculpt looks great, the paint looks great. I really like the yellow flame detailing as well as that Autobot insignia. And as we take a look here at the arms, you can see the shoulders also look pretty nice, but in my opinion the lower forearms are just way too stubby. They really do look out of proportion, especially when in comparison to how big and broad the actual top section is. You can see the hands are super stubby, literally don't even resemble hands in my opinion. We do get the exhaust blasters here on the side of which have been painted and they don't look too bad, but I'm once again not a huge fan of how these actual shoulder joints do in fact just sort of stick out to the side. That's something that we haven't really seen on this line so far, and is something that I'm really hoping we can in fact actually see abolished going forwards. You can see here for the lower region once more some pretty nice sculpt work as well as paint, but the legs are by far one of the most kibbly aspects of this figure and for the core class in general. We literally haven't seen anything like this other than Core Megatron's backpack, and to be honest I actually even think that looks a little better than how these have turned out. You can see how you've literally got, I'd say about 40% of the vehicle mode just stuck to the back of these, which really isn't great. But you can see there they have tried to detail the interior, and as we take a look here towards the front of the shin, you can see there some pretty decent sculpt work, but definitely not as great as I was expecting. And then as we just spin our attention here round to the back, you can once more see not looking the best personally. Now there is in fact a few ways of which you can kind of make this look ever so slightly better. If you actually disengage the backpack region, the spoiler slash fin is detachable, so you can remove that, click this section here, and in fact reverse this round and attach that there onto the back, which I personally think looks a little better, and from a front perspective it does indeed make that look slightly more predominant. So if that is a look that you wish to go for, then you certainly can do that here with this guy. And something else which I'm not a massive fan of is how hollow the back of Hot Rod's head is. Literally, for those of you wondering why he didn't use his blasters in order to actually fire Megatron in the face just before he of course shot down Prime, it is simply because Hot Rod has no brains. He literally is completely hollow there in the head, which whilst you're never really going to display this guy from the back, it just has a rather cheap feel, and once more is something that we haven't really seen from this line so far. So I am hoping that, considering this guy was supposed to be originally scheduled to be released in Legacy, that this isn't the standard that we are expecting to see in that particular line. But you can see here for the actual articulation, we do in fact get a swivel joint here at the head, which can look left to right. We get ball joints here at the arms, which can rotate forward and backwards, as well as sadly not really hinge all that far out to the sides. We do get ball joints here at the elbows, which can rotate the full 360, but once more you can just see how short and stubby that forearm is. Literally it looks terrible, and the hands really do remind me of when Deadpool is in fact actually respawning one of his hands after it's cut off. They just look comedically small. We sadly don't get any form of waist rotation. The legs here are on ball joints, they can kick forwards that far as well as back to that far out to the sides. Ball joint here at the knee, which allows for an almost thigh swivel, as well as of course a 90-degree rotation, but nothing at the foot at all. So overall, personally in bot mode I do find him to be slightly underwhelming once more, especially considering the standard that we've seen from the line so far. It could be just because we've been slightly spoiled with Starscream and Soundwave, but this figure in my opinion really does feel like a step in the wrong direction, and almost reminds me of some of those legend scale figures that we saw for Transformers The Last Knight, which truth be told weren't the best. Now in terms of accessories, he merely only includes one, that being this Energon infused Sword of Primus, You can see sculpted pretty decently, and I actually really love this almost all spark blue paint that we've got going on. Can be inserted into either of the figure's hands, so you simply just peg that in there, and he does look pretty awesome whilst wielding it, but once more, the overall figure just doesn't look all that great. So without further ado, let's very quickly move on to some size comparisons. Here we have Roddy compared next to Optimus Prime and Megatron, definitely not in scale to what we saw from the show, but in terms of the actual scale class, he is standard for this particular lineup. And here we have him compared next to two vastly superior figures in my opinion, Core Soundwave as well as Core Starscream, and you could just see that these two figures here look great. They're literally really well filled out, there's barely any actual backpack kibble on them. This guy in fact actually cleans up a little better when in comparison to his Voyager counterpart, and for the most part they were in fact actually pretty filled out. You can see as we spin our attention here to the back, Starscream and Soundwave alike are in fact actually filled out pretty decently, whereas with Hot Rod you can see that he's really rather hollow. There really isn't much substance to him, he's incredibly skinny, and whilst of course these two also do have hollow spaces where the back of the heads are concerned, the gaps are nowhere near as big here as what we're actually seeing with this guy. You can literally see that he's got no back of the head at all, and definitely from a side profile really looks incredibly unsightly. I know that it's going to be a little difficult to in fact justify my opinion on this figure considering that he is only $10, but once more, honestly, when you actually get him in hand and you compare him to the quality that we've seen previously, he definitely does feel like a downgrade to me. And for one final comparison, of course, we had to compare Core Hot Rod next to Studio Series Voyager Hot Rod, as well as the Commander Class Rodimus Prime. So we'll turn to transformation. Once more, definitely a lot more straightforward when in comparison to some of the other figures. So for the arms, you can see we've got a tab here on the inside that will in fact peg there into that slot. So it's just a case of hinging this section here all the way up and just snapping that section there into place. Of course, come to this side and repeat the same process. So just lock that section in until it does in fact snap in there. We can then take this region, hinge that there, come here to these legs, and you're in fact going to want to disengage this joint, hinge this out to the sides, and just bring them out like so, as we are in fact going to collapse this spoiler section down, and then you are going to want to take these sections here, extend those just like so, and once more check out how much of the vehicle is in fact actually hanging off the back of the leg. That's the entire windscreen as well as the entire front hood of the Alt mode, so definitely once again not the best in my opinion as far as engineering is concerned, but just of course hinge this section like so. Now what you'll want to do is in fact actually hinge these up, so just compress those into those cavities, and you can see we've got two massive hollow spaces there that will be filled via these tabs. So just connect that in there, come to this side, of course connect that section there into place, come here to the top path and just clip that in there. And something which is worth noting is that on the actual instructions it does state that there should be two circular tabs here that should in fact be held in via these slots. Now whilst the slots are still here, they've completely abolished the tabs. They are not here at all. Now I put that down to the simple fact as they would have been incredibly small and more than likely would have snapped off, but you will see when we actually do try and connect this into place, it doesn't like to stay tabbed in all that much. So now it is literally just a matter of collapsing all of this down, locking this entire section, or at least trying your best to lock this in to place. But there you've got Core Class Hot Rod fully transformed up into once again a pretty decent vehicle mode. To be honest with you, I think out of the two modes this is probably the more solid. You can see really nice paintwork where the windscreen is concerned. Once more you can see some nice detailing for the flames. Sadly no Autobot insignia here, which is a missed opportunity in my opinion. I think the spoiler looks pretty nice. You are able to appreciate some of the details of which went slightly missed in bot mode, and you can see we do get some nice sculpt work here for the top. The exhausts have been completely painted, the tyres there cast out of black plastic, but we do get those really ugly red mushroom joints, and here from the front sadly there are in fact no paint apps here for the actual headlights, and here from the rear you can see that it is merely just the base of the foot, but they've tried their best to in fact actually add some tail lights which once again don't look too bad, and of course you can roll along the ground with ease, which is fantastic to see. And in regards to some very quick weapon storage, you can take this Sword of Primus and either actually peg that there into this slot, which actually looks pretty decent, or of course you can take that tab and of course peg that there into that slot, which once again also doesn't look too bad. So you definitely do have a couple of options where this Hot Rod is concerned. So let's bring out a few other core class vehicle comparisons, and then of course I'll give you guys my final thoughts. Here we have him compared next to Optimus Prime and Starscream, and as far as the scale class is concerned, definitely decently sized, especially when compared next to Optimus. He is in fact actually a little longer as well as slightly broader, but when we take a look here at Starscream, a figure of which in my opinion is just vastly superior in pretty much every single way, you can see Starscream is just so much larger, and And honestly, if it comes down to these two figures, I'd recommend Starscream any day of the week. I think this guy in bot mode's fantastic, great in jet mode, and in fact actually has a transformation which for the $10 price point even surprises me for this day. And I really do feel as if though sadly Hot Rod does take a step in the wrong direction. I really do not hope that this is the quality that we can be expecting to see for these Generation Core Class figures going forward for the likes of Legacy. And so, some final thoughts for this Transformers Kingdom Core Class Hot Rod. In all honesty, I'd say this guy's average, if anything a little poor, especially when in comparison to the likes of Starscream and Soundwave. He really does remind me of some of those later Legends releases that we saw for the last night, such as Crosshairs and Drift. Not made the best, the materials definitely don't feel as good as some of the previous figures. I think the engineering is way too simplistic. Now granted, we may have been slightly spoiled with some of the previous offerings, but I do think they could have done something a little better, especially where the kibble of the legs is concerned. I also think the stubby nature to the forearms is really off-putting, especially in regards to overall proportions. I think he's got a pretty decent range of paint, especially where the torso and the actual front section of the vehicle is concerned, but other than that, we are merely just dealing with red plastic. The silver exhausts look pretty nice. I do actually really like the Sword of Primus, but the joints don't feel the best either. The hollow nature to the head is just awful. Whilst of course some of the other figures did also have some hollowness, it definitely wasn't as bad as the likes of here of Hot Rod. And in my personal opinion, if you can only choose to pick up one core class release, then I really feel as if though Hot Rod would be at the bottom of that list. I think Starscream is by far the best that we've seen, and pretty much any of the other figures I would definitely opt to choose over this guy. So with all that being said, I do apologise that this review has been on the slightly more negative side, but I just have to be completely honest with you guys, and in all honesty, 9 times out of 10, I'm pretty positive about a release, but this guy just let me down. I just don't think he's as good as Hasbro and Takara can produce, and if you do get the opportunity to in fact actually pick what core class figure you add to your collection, then Hot Rod here I definitely don't think is it. I really hope that you guys enjoyed this review. I would love to know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section below. Of course, also be sure to let me know what you guys thought of the review, and until my next review, I'll see you then. Thanks for watching.